So the TIE SE bomber finally adds ordnance to the First Order factions in the form of bombs and a cheaper solution to the TIE VN silencer on putting torpedoes on the table. Now, last video we talked about Breach and how to put him into a list because he's actually a really strong pilot. And also in that video we talked about the most overpowered X-Wing list probably in the game. So if you want to check that out, go ahead and check out that video. Link to that video in the description of this one. But in today's video, we're going to take a look at all the generic bomber pilots because this is an area I think that should be really explored. Obviously, any ordnance carrier in the entire game that uses proton torpedoes, whether it be an X-Wing, a Y-Wing, a TIE bomber, usually always needs like a support ship, like a U-Wing or a Republic gunship, or just something with a coordinate on its action bar to coordinate to that torpedo carrier. That way that torpedo carrier can have a focus and a target lock. There are a few ways to get around this, of course, like targeting synchronizer, which lets you just target lock one dude and everyone else can shoot that guy with their target lock weapons. But the TIE SE bomber has some very interesting ways to get around using a support ship to get focus and target lock. It can get focus and target lock on its own, which is what we're going to cover in this video. But before we cover how it gets it on its own, we're going to see how it works with a support ship on the whole focus target lock deal. So of course with our shuttle, we're going to use the XC class light shuttle simply because it's cheaper than the Upsilon. You could use the Upsilon, but that's a lot more expensive, so we're just going to use the XC. And our first upgrade is actually going to be General Hux because he's going to be able to coordinate to 3 different bombers, and that's going to be a good idea for this list. Now for this combination to work, you do need a tactical officer because Hux requires you to treat a white coordinate as a red, and the XC classes is a red. So the tactical officer will make the XC class shuttles a white, so that Hux can treat it as red so he can trigger his ability, basically. And then, of course, we have the SE bomber pilots. You can either use the same Argenis test pilot or the First Order Cadet. The First Order Cadet has an extra initiative and an EPT slot for 1 extra point, which I think is worth it, but it doesn't really matter. You can use either one. And, of course, put on Proton Torpedoes. So, with the basic list here, we have 3 Sam Argenis test pilots, with all of them with Proton Torpedoes, an XC-class light shuttle with General Hux and Tactical Officer. Now, that is a First Order Cadet there that's being shown, but that's because I don't have 3 copies of Signer Jameis test pilot, so I'm just doing that. This list is 170 points. Each Signer Jameis test pilot is 43 points with a Proton Torpedo attached to it, so that's pretty cheap. The shuttle itself is only 41 points, 35 points, and then Hux and the Tactical Officer are each 3 points, so 41 overall. So with that extra 30 points, you have a lot of options. You can do an extra First Order TIE Fighter, like, say, Muse. I think Muse would actually probably be a good idea. That way she can shed a stress off one of your guys. But you could also do something different, like, Omega Squadron Ace, TN3465, or just a simple Epsilon Squadron Cadet. And then or a Zeta Squadron Cadet, and then use the remaining 3 or 4 points to increase all your Sam Argenis test pilots to First Order Cadets. And this is basically how the list would work. You would start by moving your shuttle up with the 1 forward. Now you want to give your shuttle enough space between the bombers so that it fits in that space. It's a medium-based ship, so that will have to be worked out a little bit and it will be tested out. But then you want your shuttle to coordinate to all the bombers, giving them all an action. I recommend always doing a focus action, simply because that's an easy token for the bombers to use. And if you try to do a target lock in this scenario, you could easily end up out of range. So if I had tried to do a target lock there, I would have missed. So instead, just focus always with the coordinate. Now, all your bombers are going to get stressed because of General Hux, and the shuttle itself is also stressed. So the reason why you move the shuttle first, thus, is that way the bombers, once they execute their maneuvers, if they're all doing like 1 forwards, like they are right now, they're going to lose that stress token so they can perform their own action. Now, of course, you could move all the bombers forward, have them all focus, and then have the shuttle move after them to give them all the target lock. But I think it's better to have the bombers themselves do the target lock and just have the shuttle give them a focus. Because if you have the shuttle move second, the bombers are going to end up being stressed through the end phase to the next round. So having the bombers move after the shuttle coordinates them, just make sure that they don't have any stress tokens. So next round, they have really any maneuver choice now. They just have any maneuver choice. Yeah, they're totally fine. Anyways, then you just target lock. Basically, you just target lock whatever ship you want to shoot down. Let's say if that Republic gunship was, say, a different type of ship that had a lot more hit points, we would put like all the target locks on it, or just a couple. and then maybe one on another ship, or we just put them all on that one ship. Now, you don't really want to target lock. Now, we could have target locked that X-Wing, but that X-Wing has a higher initiative than our bombers, so it most likely will be moving really fast into our list, so it'll be getting at range 1. And at range 2 or 3, you're going to use Proton Torpedoes for 4 attack dice. At range 1, you're only going to be having 3, so it's way better to go for the range 2 or 3 shots rather than for the range 1 shot. Also, that X-Wing does have a higher initiative, so he's going to be so you're likely going to be shooting after he does. So it's just better to shoot down people that are going to shoot after you. That way, they don't get to shoot at all. And that's basically the essential idea of using this list. Just move the shuttle first, coordinate all the bombers, have them all do some blue maneuvers, so they lose all their stress tokens and they can perform their second action, and they're prepped for the next round. There is, however, a few things we can add to this list to make it even more interesting. So let's say we're using First Order Cadets and you want to give them extra upgrades, like, say, Proud Tradition. So Proud Tradition lets you perform focuses while you're stressed. The only downside is after you perform an attack while stressed, your opponent can spend a focus or suffer critical damage to flip your card to the False Tradition side, where all your focus actions turn red. The other card we want to equip to him is Pattern Analyzer, which lets them perform an action right after executing red maneuver. It does not, however, remove their action step. It still exists, it's just blocked by the stress token. So what do those cards have to do with this situation? Well, for one thing, it gives us a lot more options. So of course, your shuttle's going to go 1 forward or whatever and barely fit into that space gap. Now, the issue is we want our bombers to do some turnaround maneuvers, like some sector loops or whatever, because they're obviously going to go too far by doing a 1 bank. So in that case, the shuttle can really only give one of the bombers a coordinate for like a focus or whatever, but that's only 1 bomber. And that's kind of weak, to be honest. So how can we get both of our bombers with focus and target lock? Well, that's where the Proud Tradition and Fanatical combo comes in. Let's say you have engine upgrade, or even without engine upgrade, it can also work, but let's just say you have engine upgrade. So your boost is now white, so we can activate the bomber's pursuit thrusters ability, boosting out there a little bit. Having troubles doing the token here. This is having some troubles moving it around. Okay, anyways. And then once we get to our maneuver step, we can do a 3 Segner's Loop maneuver, which is a red maneuver, of course, and it's going to leave our bomber stressed. But Pattern Analyzer is going to kick in at this moment, which gives us a target lock, which we can use to acquire target lock on anyone that we want with that free action. We'll lock onto the X-Wing right there just because it's, I guess the better ship to lock on or whatever. Though we could lock onto that other X-Wing. It's just likely going to move out of range, though, because it's barely at range 3. So, locking onto the X-Wing with our action, we can then use Proud Tradition to perform our focus action right as we get that stress token. With this bomber, we're not going to do the boost. Either it doesn't have engine upgrades, or just doesn't want to use it, just wants to do red maneuver. Kind of just showing that you don't have to have engine upgrades. So it just does the 3 Segner's Loop maneuver, gets a target lock with the Pattern Analyzer action, gets the stress token, but because of Fanatical, it can still use its perform action step to perform a focus token. So that's really solid. That means our shuttle doesn't even have to coordinate in this situation. It can just focus for its own safety or own attack or whatever. That's a really solid combination there. It lets us go the first round with the shuttle, getting all our focus and target locks for the initial joust. But then after that, we can do some red maneuvers with our bombers and either add the boost action during the system phase with pursuit thrusters or just do the red maneuver to get yet another focus target lock round in. That's 2 turns of focus target lock torpedoes. That's really solid and definitely will do a lot of damage. Now, of course, the only disadvantage with this strategy is if they choose to take the extra crit or choose to spend their focus token after you shoot them while you're stressed, you'll get to the False Tradition side, which treats your focuses as red. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, though, mainly because you can still have your shuttle coordinate you the target lock actions. Of course, with General Hux, this means that the shuttle and both the bombers are going to get stressed because it is a red action, but nonetheless, the bombers will get their target locks. And then they can easily do some 1 forward maneuvers to remove their stress tokens in order to perform their focus action. The only downside, of course, is they're way closer to their opponent. So if you don't time it right, if you're at like range 2 with a torpedo, you could end up at range 1. If you're at range 3, like the example just showed, you're now at range 2. So if you don't use the torpedoes correctly, this can definitely go badly. And even so, the focus is still red, so this means that they are carrying the stress token through the end phase, which means that they won't be able to get focus target lock next round. They'll have to take a round off. Now, you still do get the first 2 rounds focus target lock completely. After that, though, it's kind of just, every other round. And it takes a little while to set up. But it still is a pretty good strategy. Now, You can still do a red maneuver and by using pattern analyzer get a target lock on someone. It's just that you won't be able to perform the focus action anymore because of course Proud Tradition flipped over. It doesn't even have that second half of the ability, so you're only getting a target lock. Thankfully though, you can use the shuttle's singular coordinate to coordinate, but it only can go to one bomber. It can't go to both of them. If you try to do red maneuver while you're already stressed, you end up just doing a 2 white forward. So if the shuttle just coordinates one bomber, which will be a white action for the bomber and a white action for the shuttle, if the bomber does a target lock, then it won't be stressed, and then it'll be able to do its 3 Segners loop. That way, it can still use pattern analyzer to perform a focus action. The only downside, of course, is that although you do get the focus token, it's now going to come at the cost of 2 stress tokens as well, simply because you have 1 for the maneuver and 1 for the focus action being red. So it could end up being bad, kind of, and so yeah, it's kind of, after you get stressed with the Proud Tradition, it could kind of mess up your strategy. But you at least have 2 rounds of focus target lock purely, and after that you can easily like miss and match wherever you need to. You could always just target lock, come in next round with a torpedo attack, and that's totally fine too. Now, of course, you always want to have good target lock etiquette. Not in every situation will you have a shot, just like this bomber here. The X-Wing is just barely outside of its firing arc. So you really just want to be sure that you're locking onto the right targets. And you don't really want to lock onto high initiative pilots. This X-Wing did it too hard in, so in this case it could have been good for that bomber to lock onto that X-Wing. But what if that X-Wing had simply done instead, say, a 3 hard the other way, or a 4K turn to get behind the XC-class light shuttle? Well, then the bomber would have been way out of range even then. So, as you can see, you really just want to lock onto targets that you know are going to be still, that you can still shoot, and really just lock on with wisely. Really, the focus target lock, the target lock's what's going to get your shot off. You really need to make sure that that goes through. The focus is just what makes your 4 attack dice get 4 hits, basically, guaranteed. So, you really got to lock onto the right ships. And even if you don't, you still have like a good range 1 shot on that Y-Wing in some cases. So, it still could come out well. Earlier I was saying there are strategies to get a target lock and a focus without any shuttle nearby. So now we're going to open up and see just exactly how this works. And you can all probably already figure this out. We take our regular first order cadet, give him Proud Tradition, Pattern Analyzer, and Proton Torpedoes. So that way if he does a red maneuver, say a 1 hard or a 3 Segners loop, he gets his target lock from Pattern Analyzer, gets to his perform action step, and can still use his perform action step to do a focus because of Proud Tradition, getting his amazing 4 attack dice torpedo shot off. Now, of course, there are many variations to this strategy. You could have both your bombers do 1 hards, which is preferable if you're just starting an engagement. You don't really necessarily want to, if you're just turning into your opponent to get into range 3, a 1 hard is definitely good. You can also, however, do 3 Segner loops if you're already at range 3 your opponent. Say they just shot you at range 3 last round, you thought you would be clear for a 1 hard this round, but it's better if you do 3 Segners loop because you'll still be at range 3, able to do a target lock, and that way if they move into you, most likely this shot will still be range 3, hopefully. It could be range 1, but hopefully it's range 3. I mean, regardless, you could be at range 1 with a focus and a target lock and still have an okay 3 attack dice shots. Not 4 dice, but it's still okay. You could also, of course, switch it up, having one of them do a 1 hard and, say, the other one doing a 3 Segners loop. It really doesn't matter. You could also have them being on 2 opposite sides of the table. It does not matter. These bombers are self-sufficient. They can fly together. They can fly separately. They can do whatever the hell you want them to do. Now, of course, this strategy does have its limits. Obviously, you're stressed now, so you have to do a blue maneuver in order to lose it. And any blue maneuver is likely going to put you at range of the enemy, so you want to go as fast as possible. That way, you have a possible chance at bumping the enemy ship or causing the enemy ship to bump into you. That way, you can't get shot at. It's better to cause them to bump into you. That way, you still have your action, so you can still do a target lock on them to use it for a new torpedo strike next round. Or you can do a a reload in order to recover your a charge on your proton torpedo. So you have those 2 different options you can do, and if you have a first order ordnance tech, you of course can do both of them in one. You can also, however, do a boost if you want to instead. So like you do your maneuver and you boost in order to get to a different range. This works particularly well if you have engine upgrade on your bomber. That way the boost is a white maneuver, so you aren't stressing yourself. And if you have the boost and if you have engine upgrade, that means your pursuit thrusters will also be white as well, which can come extremely in handy. So yeah, the strategies on these guys are limitless. Engine upgrade, first ordnance tech, bombs, all add to this whole torpedo thing. This is just like the beginning of the barrel with the bombers. Like, this torpedo strategy is by no means the end to what these guys can do. Obviously, by adding a bomb, an engine upgrade, and a first order ordnance tech, you're going to be somewhere around 60 points, but I still think that's really fairly priced for these guys. They do a lot of damage, and with those extra cards, they're just going to be even more nasty. Because as you see here, this bomber now is going to do a 3 Segners loop, right? And if he still has Proud Tradition active, it's not been flipped over yet to its red focus action side. That means he's going to be able to do his target lock and focus actions again. And because he recovered a torpedo from last round, he's back up to 2 charges on his Proton Torpedoes. So basically, you take a round of torpedoes, you go a round of not shooting and not getting shot at, hopefully, and then you go all back into it. This bomber, on the other hand, took the slightly different approach. He did the boost, obviously. So during his system phase, he's going to go ahead and perform this boost action, because, you know, he might as well. And then he's going to do a snap turn 1 hard, meaning that he's going to be a little bit closer than the other bomber is to the enemy, but he is going to have a little bit better of a chance at getting a good old shot off. Now, of course, if your bomber already did do a target lock last round, they could easily do a boost with pursuit thrusters to a 2 hard maneuver. That way they have 0 stress and the focus and the target lock, but they would have had to do a target lock last round. And there's a lot of situations which you want to reload in the rounds that you're not getting shot at, and that you're just, because you just want to recover that Proton Torpedo charge. So that's where the first order in its tech really comes in handy, by letting you both reload and link that to a white target lock, incurring no stress tokens and a reload with your beautiful target lock for next round. And of course, bomber pilots like Grudge and Dread do not have EPT talents, but Breach does. Now, of course, Breach in the last video where you talked about him, he has a much better upgrade list and a much better strategy, so watch that video. So that leaves Scorch as our last non-unique pilot that can be used as a better alternative to the Epsilon Cadets. At 35 points, he's about 3 points more than Epsilon Cadet, but he has a higher initiative value, initiative 4, which is a really good initiative for trying to acquire target locks. He's going to be able to have an even better choice at which target he wants to acquire a lock onto. And while he's performing a primary attack, or while any ship at range 0 to 1 of them is performing a primary attack for that reason, they can spend a hit result to give the defender a strain token. This works really well with first order TIE fighters because they only have 2 attack dice. They might not be able to get a hit through, and particularly well with Muse. In general, I see Muse as a good combination for bomber pilots because you obviously want to get rid of their stress tokens. To do that, you either need Electronic Baffle, which takes the place of Engine Upgrade, or you just use Muse, because her ability is at the start of the engagement phase, you may choose a friendly ship at range 0 to 1. That ship removes 1 stress token. So although it only works for one of your 2 or 3 bombers, one of those bombers can at least have a much better turn, and the other one can then just go 3 forward. So at least you have one bomber doing torpedo strats while the other one's recovering to do its torpedo strats next round. So yeah, definitely Muse adds a whole lot to the whole bomber strategy by removing those stress tokens. And depending on how you maneuver her with the bombers, that can go really good. Because of course, Muse is going to need to be at range 1 of any stress bomber every round, so that's going to be kind of your main issue with Muse. You're going to have to do some really interesting maneuvers. For example, in this scenario, doing a 3 hard to a barrel roll does get her at range 1 of the bomber, as we're about to see here. That's a beautiful range 1 gain right there. And it also does push her closer to her list and away from the enemies, as we can see here. This X-Wing doesn't even have an arc on Muse because of how aggressive she is. Fly aggressively, basically. But more importantly, by getting rid of the stress token on the SE bombers with Muse's ability, you prevent the happening that they could possibly lose Proud Tradition for False Tradition. You prevent that card flipping over to get them red focus actions. Because in order for Proud Tradition to become False Tradition, they have to perform an attack while being stressed. Then, of course, the defender can suffer a crit or spin a focus token. If you don't have a stress to begin with, they can't suffer a critical or spin a focus to flip your card to the False Tradition side. So that's another bonus for putting Muse. Your bombers will essentially always be able to do a focused target lock off of a red maneuver. And she works really well with Scorch because she can spend a hit to get a strain token. I mean, she only has 2 attack dice, obviously, so this is a great strategy for her. Of course, she is a lower initiative than Scorch, so unless you have other ships in your squadron, that's an ability that's not really going to be that helpful. Or you could just give Muse Swarm Tactics, that way she can make Scorch an initiative 2, so they both engage in initiative 2. But I kind of don't recommend that. I would just put other ships in your squadron with initiative 2, or just have Muse shoot, and the strain token is kind of something your opponent has to think about for next round, if she can't get hit through. So, but yeah, that's all the torpedo strategies you can use with the SE bombers. Now, the reason why I like the shuttle is because the bombers aren't going to be stressed too much. Like the first round, they don't have to be stressed, they can be fine. But I do like the individual bomber strategy though without the shuttle, just because I don't need to waste, like, say 41 points on a shuttle. That's 41 points that I can use on an interceptor, on an SF fighter, or for Muse for only like 30 points. So I save like 11 points for the rest of my list. One good list idea is Scorch with Proud Tradition, Pattern Analyzer, Proton Torpedoes, a First Order Cadet with Proud Tradition, Pattern Analyzer, Proton Torpedoes, Muse with Fanatical, and then 2 Omega Squadron Aces with Crack Shot. That's a really cool list idea. It all fits in 200 points, and that's about 5 ships, 2 torpedo carriers with a bunch of FOs. You can easily make the Omega Squadron Aces like Zeta Squadron pilots. That way you can have more points to put engine upgrades or First Order Ordnance techs on Scorch or the First Order Cadet. So yeah, there's a lot of playthrough in that list. But yeah, those are the best strategies to get focused target lock Proton Torpedoes off on the SE TIE bombers, whether with a shuttle or without a shuttle. And of course there are other strategies too. You could easily use targeting synchronizer on a TIE bomber, have that bomber get a focus and a target lock, and then have the bomber next to it use the gunner DT-79B in order to get rerolls with its focus token on its torpedo strike. That way they both shoot the same target with Proton Torpedoes. One of them has a target lock for rerolls, but the other one has this gunner for rerolls too. Now, I do think that overall just using Proud Tradition and Pattern Analyzer is best though, or using a shuttle just because you don't have to like shoot at the same guy with both bombers. That way you can split your shots. So that's why I was in this video more or less focusing on the whole Proud Tradition, Pattern Analyzer thing, and the shuttle thing, because those are the 2 best strategies in my opinion. And I do think that the Proud Tradition Pattern Analyzer strategy is the best, especially when combined with Muse, because you could easily give her Crack Shot or just pair her with Scorch. That way she's actually doing something too. And yeah, I think that's really cool. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments if you liked any of the ideas I put forward, if you didn't like them, or whatever. I have a link to the X-Wing list I made in this video in the description. So go ahead and check that out. It's the one with the 2 bombers and 3 First Order TIE Fighters. I am not going to put one with the shuttle in the description simply because there's way too many possibilities with that list. It's literally just 3 bombers with torpedoes, the shuttle with General Hux, and a tactical officer, and you have like 30 points left after that. So that's really just up to you if you want to add another First Order TIE Fighter, upgrade all the bombers, or do whatever you want to do with that list, basically. So yeah, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope it really shows you that these SE bombers are insanely good with focused target lock torpedoes. They definitely do not need a shuttle to help them focus target lock. So yeah, it's going to be really cool with these guys. Anyways, see you guys next time. May the Force be with you, and good luck.